Welcome to Flex That Success. Hello, I'm Lindsay Randazzo, and prepare to feel lucky because you're listening to the very first episode of Flex That Success, the podcast where we kick that scary F word failure in the butt and use it to grow in our successes. Let me fill you in real quick on what sparked this inspiring podcast. Recently, I had the privilege to work with some incredible ladies, shout out Stephanie, Tessa, and Emily, on looking at failure as a learning mode. What we found that over the years, our societal norm of failure is more of a barrier than a means of learning. Now, how did that come to be? I mean, look at Thomas Edison's invention of the light bulb. He, quote unquote, failed many times, but instead of calling them failures, he simply said the light bulb just had a lot of steps. Any successful person in history didn't get it on the first try. Some of our best inventions we use today are the products of multiple failures, yet many of us ordinary Joes give up after one failed attempt. In this podcast, we are not going to tell you you'll never fail again. You're right. But we will share ideas with you to make failing less scary. Tools to help not only you use your failures to succeed, but to help your friends, family, and colleagues use their failed attempts as opportunities for success. So this week, let us start by taking a look at the word failure. Who on earth thought this was some wonderful word to use, especially when talking about how to measure aptitude and abilities? Let's talk kindergarten for a second. Picture a teacher discussing with a parent that their child has failed their letters and sounds test. Now, that parent goes home and says to the child, "You don't know your letters and sounds, so we have to practice." The child now feels like they are failing. The parents feel like they're failing, and it all started with that word. As a group, we surveyed many educators to reevaluate the word fail, and one question we asked was, what other words could we use instead? Words that might encourage learning instead of encouraging people to give up. So the next time you think about using the word failed, failing, or failure, try some of these verses on for size. Mistake, experiment, work in progress, you're in the middle of a learning moment, opportunity to learn, you don't get that quite yet, but this one was particularly my favorite because it used the word fail. Instead of saying fail in its normal terms, it redefined it by using it as an acronym. F for first, A for attempt, I for in, and L for learning. So looking at failed as first attempt in learning. How creative is that? And I have to think if some of these teachers were coming up with creative ways to redefine fail, they have to have some pretty awesome classroom communities. I think sometimes we forget that the words we say not only to other people, to ourselves, affect the things that we do. So that brings me to my next segment of the podcast. Now it's time for a book shout out. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words could never hurt me, and this I knew was surely true, and truth could not desert me. But now I know it is not so. I've changed that latter part, for sticks and stones may break the bones, but words can break the heart. Sticks and stones may break the bones, but leave the spirit whole, but simple words can break the heart, or silence crush the soul. Now that's deep. That is the opening quote from Peter Johnston's Choice Words, and that is our book shout out this week. If you don't own this book, I surely recommend you pick it up because it is a fantastic tool for using words in a productive, healthy way to help foster success, even when somebody might be at their lowest point. Now, the book Choice Words is really meant to be a professional development tool for teachers. It gives teachers ideas on how to talk to students in a way to create a positive classroom environment. Instead of saying things like, "Oh, you're so smart," it teaches us to say things like, "Oh, that was really thoughtful," or "How do you feel about what you did?" Making the students really think about what they're doing. Now, I try to think of this one step further when you're thinking not just about teachers, but about maybe how an employer talks to an employee or how a parent talks to a child. The words we use are a big deal, and it can make somebody feel like they're a failure or a success, and they can make somebody feel like their first attempt maybe isn't their last, but a next step in trying to get to where their solution is. Choice Words doesn't only give you the steps and the tools to be a better communicator, whether it be with students, peers, or just friends, but it also helps for you to realize that the things you say make a huge difference on the people you're around. In chapter 2, the book goes on to talk about different questions you can ask your students, your employees, or yourself to help think of your failures, your missteps in a different way. Things like write down a line you wish you had written, or what kind of questions do you have about what you just finished? What did you notice? It's having you discover your missteps and try to make some fixes and get you closer to that success instead of giving up when you think you may have failed. Now, I don't want to ruin the whole book for you, but if you're looking for a quick read that will leave you feeling empowered with the words you use, I encourage you to pick up Peter Johnston's Choice Words. It is worth every penny, and I highly recommend it. So now that the word failure is not sounding so scary anymore, it is time to figure out how to work through times of struggle. How do we look at these moments as a step in the right direction instead of the end of the road? Giving up always seems like our easiest solution, but is there anything to gain from that? Straight up, no. You gain nothing from giving up, but you gain everything from trying over and over again, no matter how many times it takes. Relating this to a common problem, every year people embark on weight loss journeys all over the world. I know I'm guilty of it. In a study done by the University of Scranton, 92% of these attempts fail, or to use one of our new terms, don't succeed yet. One of the main reasons is their goals are not realistic or attainable. Goal setting is a huge part of the learning process. If you're not achieving those goals, you need to start thinking about getting smarter about your goals. And when I say SMART goals, I literally mean SMART goals. MindTools.com identifies SMART goals as specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound goals. They are goals that you set in a way that fosters success. And instead of giving up when you fail, you think, what SMART goals I can set to get me to my next step. That will give you the momentum and learn from mistakes that propel you towards the success. Part of setting goals is having a growth mindset. As a first grade teacher, yes, by day I mold young minds, but as a teacher, for these small people, we frequently watch Class Dojo Mojo series. This is about a little green man named Mojo who embarks on journeys towards having a growth mindset. One of these episodes is called The Power of Yet. In this episode, Mojo is learning how to do math and is getting frustrated, and at one point says, "You are either born smart or you're not." Now, we all know this isn't true, but as he's about to give up, his friend Katie says that your brain is a muscle, and if you want it to get smarter and stronger, you have to challenge it to do new things. This inspires Mojo to keep working because even though he doesn't get it yet, he will get it if he keeps working. This idea of a growth mindset leads me to another book shout out. This book shout out is brought to you by my teammate Emily. In the book, The Growth Mindset Playbook, which is by Annie Brock and Heather Hundley, it talks about a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset and how we look at mistakes when we are using both of those types of mindsets. Now, when you think about a fixed mindset, you really think that when you're at your end of your learning and you really can't learn anymore, you're in that fixed mindset. However, when we learn and grow and believe that our thoughts and learning are ever changing, that puts us in a growth mindset, which is the best place for us to be when moving and improving through our setbacks towards success. The playbook compares the two mindsets when looking at mistakes. When somebody has a fixed mindset, they might see as a mistake as something they hate and they want to avoid them at all costs. But as a growth mindset, they might see a mistake as a learning opportunity and embrace them. And so that is how the two differ so much when looking at failure, but then also looking as failures as steps to getting to someplace that's going to succeed. Where this book shout out is really similar to our last book shout out, Choice Words, is who determines whether or not somebody has a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. A teacher can simply teach about growth mindset, but if that teacher who's teaching it has a fixed mindset already, you're not going to see the results of a student coming out of school having a growth mindset. So it really determines the person who's teaching what a growth mindset looks like. And that doesn't even have to be a teacher. That's a parent that's teaching growth mindset by letting their children know that everything's ever growing, nothing's ever final. And that's an employee or telling an employee that, you know what, maybe you made a mistake, but this is something we can work through. And if that employer is not showing that they also have a growth mindset, that employee is also not going to know or have a good example of what having a growth mindset would look like. which is what the Growth Mindset Playbook starts by talking about. So that's how choice words kind of is the same, by the words that you say are influencing the person you're saying them to. One of my favorite quotes from the book is: "A person's true potential is unknown. It's impossible to foresee what can be accomplished with years of passion, toil, and training." This quote was incorporated from Carol Dweck's Mindset, The New Psychology of Success, but it couldn't be more true. I mean, you don't know your true potential, but as teachers, as educators, we need to be able to show students that potential. So, looking through this book, the different plays that it shows us helps us to see how we can put a growth mindset into a child that has problematic behaviors, to a child that maybe doesn't have enthusiasm for school. I mean, this book is truly genuine in teaching every different type of student to have a growth mindset, and that sets them up for success beyond their education. It sets them up for success even when they enter the job world, when they start to have their own families, and then they are instilling growth mindset into their children. Which brings me to the biggest solution of all when thinking about how do we reinvent failure to be a learning mode. Forget you, failure. To wrap up this episode, we need to stop looking at failure as something terrible, and that starts with us. We need to teach the next generation coming up that failure is what has given us all of these cool inventions like the light bulb, the computer we're using. We need to fail in order to succeed. And when we teach students that, we are teaching them to have a growth mindset, and that sets them up for their lives. We need to show them that failing is something beautiful. I'm Lindsay Randazzo, and thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Flex That Success.